He was the quietest guy in town, but he was the last person you'd ever expect to be a hero. Every morning, same old routine, he'd roll up that garage door, keep his head down, fix up busted engines and lock up before dark. Nobody asked about his past. And he never told a soul. Until one day, when a random customer popped the hood on an old truck and found a rusty box hidden inside. What was in that box? A medal that would blow everyone's mind about who this silent mechanic really was. So, who was this man? And why'd he keep his mouth shut all these years? If you were the one who found that box, what would you do first? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And hey, tell us what city you're watching from. Want to hear more wild stories like this? Hit that subscribe button and stick around. See you in the next one. Nobody ever paid attention to that old garage. Right at the corner of the small town's main street, under a rusty sign, a gray metal shutter would quietly roll up every morning at exactly 7:30. Behind the door appeared a man in a worn gray jumpsuit. He'd light a cigarette, roll up his sleeves, and vanish under the hood of some forgotten car. He spoke to no one. He just worked. His name was Jacob. Jacob Miller. He looked like he was in his late 40s, but nobody really knew for sure. He always wore the same gray beanie, the same weathered boots. Sometimes he'd play an old cassette player, jazz crackling through the hum of engines. People in town liked him. His work was clean, his price was fair, and he never asked for more than he earned. But he never talked. He just did the job, nodded, took the cash, and turned back to his bench. Jacob's garage looked ordinary from the street. Inside were scattered old engine parts, faded posters on the walls, and a half-empty thermos of stale coffee in the corner. But at the back there was a small storeroom with a locked door. No one went in. Even Jacob rarely did. But when he did, he always locked it behind him. Nobody wondered what Jacob was hiding. Until that day. That morning, Jacob rolled up the shutter as usual. The sky was heavy with gray clouds. The autumn wind made the old sign creak. A battered Ford truck rumbled up to the garage and stopped. Out stepped a young guy in his 20s, covered in oil and dust. His name was Mike. He wasn't from town. You could tell from his accent and the way he kept glancing around. "Hey sir," Mike said. "My truck died on me. Can you take a look?" Jacob just nodded. He pulled the truck inside, popped the hood, and disappeared into the engine's guts. Mike sat on a crate, chain-smoking nervously while Jacob worked in silence, sorting wrenches and scribbling small notes. Then Jacob heard a faint rattle. Something deep in the engine, a sound that shouldn't be there. He frowned. A loose panel near the bottom caught his eye. He didn't have to check it, but something made him do it anyway. He wedged it open with a screwdriver. Behind it, half buried in grime, was a rusty metal box. Jacob's face didn't change. Mike, on the other hand, perked up. "What's that?" Mike asked, leaning closer. Jacob didn't answer. He wiped the box clean with an old rag. On the lid was a faded emblem, the eagle insignia of the United States military. Mike couldn't keep quiet. "Aren't you gonna open it? What's in there?" Jacob took a deep breath. His eyes drifted for a moment to the far wall, as if staring into the past. Then he popped the old hinge. Inside was a small velvet pouch. He pulled it out and loosened the string. A silver medal caught the light, worn but unmistakable. A silver star, one of the highest honors for battlefield bravery in the United States. Mike froze. "Is that yours?" Jacob didn't reply. He weighed the medal in his palm, eyes distant. Then, quietly, he slipped it back into the box, turned, and headed for the locked door at the back of the garage. Mike blurted out, "Hey, who are you?" Jacob stopped. He turned halfway, met Mike's eyes for the first time. "This truck will be ready by tonight," he said flatly. Then he stepped inside the back room and shut the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed through the empty shop. Inside, Jacob carefully placed the box on a high shelf. He stared at an old photograph pinned to the wall. A young man in uniform standing with a small unit of soldiers. Mike couldn't shake it off. Each of them wore the same medal. He spent the rest of the day in the town's lone diner, waiting for his truck, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The hidden box, the medal, the photo on the wall. He tried his luck with the old waitress behind the counter. "You know Jacob Miller?" he asked. She didn't look up from her stack of dishes. "Everyone knows Jacob. Quiet fella. Good mechanic. Keeps to himself." Mike leaned in. "Was he in the military?" I saw a medal." This time the woman paused. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him, eyes sharp. "People don't ask Jacob about the past, son. He came back from a war, stop talking about it. Folks around here respect that. You should too." But Mike couldn't let it go. That wasn't just any medal, it meant he'd done something big, something nobody knew. And why hide it? Why bury it in an old truck? He decided one thing. He wouldn't leave town until he found out the truth. Early the next morning, Mike showed up at the garage before dawn. Jacob was already there as if he hadn't left all night. The truck sat out front, spotless under the rising sun. Jacob handed Mike the keys, expression blank. It's ready? Mike handed over a folded wad of bills but didn't leave. I mean, that metal, Mike stammered. I respect veterans. Who are you really? Jacob stared at him, then glanced at the back room. Go home, Mike. Stay here, live your life. But don't ask about what's behind that door. Before Mike could push further, a mail truck pulled up. The mailman handed Jacob a thick envelope, yellowed with age, stamped with a military insignia. Jacob's hands trembled as he took it. Mike stepped closer. What is that? Jacob ignored him. He tucked the envelope inside his coveralls, turned on his heel, and disappeared into the back room, locking the door tight behind him. Mike knew then, this wasn't over. Later that afternoon, a black Jeep rolled into town. The man who stepped out wasn't local. Anyone could see that. He wore a dark jacket with an old military pin on the lapel. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. He walked straight into Jacob's garage. Mike watched from across the street. He couldn't hear what they said behind the closed shutter. But when the door finally opened again, Jacob stepped out, and for the first time, Mike saw him light a cigarette with shaking hands. The stranger came out next, glanced directly at Mike and gave a nod that made Mike's blood run cold. He got back in the Jeep and drove off without a word. Jacob stood in the doorway looking at the ground, smoke curling around his weathered face. Mike couldn't sleep that night. From his tiny motel room above the diner, he could see the faint light still burning in Jacob's garage. At midnight it was still there. At 2 it hadn't gone out. Mike grabbed his coat and slipped out into the cold. He crept down the alley behind the garage. There was a tiny window back there. The glass was cracked and patched with cardboard. Carefully Mike peeled it back and peered in. Jacob sat alone at an old wooden table. In front of him lay the medal, the envelope, and the same faded photo of young soldiers. He opened the letter, read it again and again, folded it, unfolded it, his lips moving silently. Once a tear slid down his cheek. Then he lifted his head. His eyes locked on the window. Mike jerked back too late. The door swung open behind him. Jacob stood there, the envelope in his hand. His eyes were tired, not angry. Want to know the truth, Mike? He said. Then come inside. Inside, the locked room was nothing like the front of the garage. Maps, dusty crates, an old rifle mounted on the wall. On a shelf sat a radio that hadn't been touched in decades. Jacob motioned for Mike to sit. He laid the letter down in front of him. Read. Mike's hands shook as he opened the letter. At the top was the seal of the Department of Defense. Jacob Miller. If you're reading this, then we found you. What you did in northern Afghanistan in 1983 never made it onto any official record. The operation was buried, the men forgotten. But the lives you saved, they didn't forget. You went silent. You disappeared. But we didn't. We need you now, Jacob. One last time. Mike looked up, his throat dry. This is you? You were a hero? Jacob stared at the metal, voice low. I did things I don't talk about, Mike. I came back with no words left. This garage kept me breathing. But some ghosts don't stay buried. Jacob took a deep breath and pulled an old wooden box from the corner. Inside was a battered pistol and a pair of boots that looked like they'd crossed half the world. Mike couldn't help asking, what are you gonna do? Jacob lit a cigarette, the flame flickering on the metal in his palm. The man you saw, he was my old CO. He tracked me down because they think I can still help. One last time. Mike's voice cracked. But you're leaving? After all this time? Jacob almost smiled, the first hint of warmth Mike had ever seen. Sometimes a man has to go back to the place he ran from, Mike. Otherwise he never really left it behind. At sunrise, the black Jeep was waiting again. Jacob came out wearing his old boots, his battered jacket zipped to his neck. He handed Mike a small envelope with shaky hands. It's for you. The shop's paid off. You keep it running. Fix engines. Keep it quiet. Mike tried to protest, but Jacob just shook his head. If anyone asks, tell them you don't know. Some stories are better that way. The Jeep pulled away slowly down the dusty road. Jacob didn't look back. He never would. Months later, the garage stayed open. Mike kept the old sign, the old posters. Sometimes at night, he'd sit at Jacob's old desk and read the note Jacob left behind. If they ask who I was, tell them I was more than a mechanic. I was a man who did what he had to do, then chose silence. Some heroes wear medals. Some wear grease and dust. Keep it quiet, Mike. Some legends live better in silence. And so, in a forgotten corner of a small town, the light in that garage never truly goes out.